My name is Ian Connett. I am the legal director for Collective here in New York. We're in the ad tech space. Prior to Collective, I ran legal operations for a large technology distributor, a company called Westcon. Worked on a lot of contract management solutions and got really hands-on with legal technology and how that helps the in-house department. So really excited to be here. Thank you, Mary, for having me back. Mary originally asked me to do my general counsel of 2020 speech, but I realized that's only 3 years away, so I don't know if that's going to be interesting at this point anymore to people. So I actually was recently spending some time on a farm nearby. I live a little bit upstate in Tarrytown, and there's a farm called Stone Barn Farms, if anyone's heard of it. And I got this book called The Lean Farm, and I started to read about microfarming. And my brain just started to explode even more, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to talk about this at the DARWIN talk because there's so many applications to what we're trying to achieve here at Evolve Law. So what can law departments learn from sustainable farming on the microfarm? So this is a microfarm. You might see it on a rooftop, maybe not in Midtown Manhattan, but in the Bronx or Brooklyn. Maybe some of you are wondering, what does farming have to do with Evolve Law? We will get there. I became interested after seeing these things pop up in New York City, and after getting this book, I learned that it's actually sweeping the nation, and that these smaller micro farms, which are usually less than 5 acres, they're actually competing against larger industrial scaled farming operations. And the goal and the actual outcome is happier and healthier communities and farmers. So I don't know how many people here is anyone here in a CSA or doing community supported agriculture. It's a great thing for everyone. So here's just an example of kind of, there's New York obviously in a micro farm, and to compare and contrast, kind of what the opposite would be there. So why is the Millennial GC doing a DARWIN talk on micro farming? And it's because they are mastering the art of doing more with less. So how many people here are in-house counsels or run legal departments? How many have been asked to do more with less? So everyone's hands did not even go down. This is the question that we're constantly asked. Do more, do less, do more with less. How are micro farmers doing more with less? The answer is actually found in the application of lean principles or lean thinking. So I don't have an MBA. This was sort of news to me. I don't know has anyone heard of lean principles or lean thinking? Okay, so a good amount of people. So maybe this is just interesting for me, but in any event, micro farms are applying lean principles to achieve higher crop yields and compete against the larger farms. And this book actually is, I'll just cite it here, The Lean Farm by Ben Hartman. Really breaks it down more in the application to farming. But the lean principles originated in post-World War II Japan, actually culminated in the rise of Toyota. And they dominated the auto industry with the highest levels of efficiency and profitability in the 80s, 90s. And actually, there was a book written about it called The Toyota Way, a little bit before my time. But because I am the Millennial GC. I never read that book. So, but I'm reading it now. And I think that's Tachi Ono, who was actually one of I guess he was the creator of the Toyota process. And he lived to be about 100. So there's Tachi Ono and also Shigeo Shingo, who's now, I think he might still be around. He's a world-leading expert on manufacturing. And this book is just full of great quotes from these two. So just to share 2 of them, costs do not exist to be calculated. Costs exist to be reduced. And it's the last turn of the bolt that tightens it. The rest is just movement. And that's called Shingo's bolt. And we will return to Shingo's bolt. So we need to go deeper. So lean principles, it's a process to ruthlessly eliminate muda. So muda is a Japanese word for waste. And the goal is to basically scour your system, your department, your farm, whatever it may be, lots of applications for any type of waste, and ruthlessly eliminate that from your process. The goal is a state of kaizen, which means good change, or I guess a perfect state of continuous improvement. So once you've made the improvements, the work has actually just begun. You need to continue to actually improve upon the process, and as technology adapts, apply new technologies or new processes to continue the flow. And so there's tons of principles, but we're just going to talk about 4 because this is a 10-minute Darwin talk, and we want to be efficient in our time. So 4 principles we'll talk about and quickly apply them to the legal department. First one is define customer value. So I think this is something that a lot of companies do really well, but I don't know if lawyers do it so well, and I don't know if in-house counsel really knows what the client wants. What does the client really value? And we need to dig in, and this is the first step, because in order to maximize value, we need to know what is that value. So if you're on a farm, it's tomatoes or carrots, but in your in-house department is, are we looking for faster contract turnarounds? Are we looking for better customer service? What is the particular compliance risk that's really keeping your CEO up at night? I think I want to start doing surveys with my client, to really, just in the same way that, an airline might do a survey. What is it that's really like keeping people up at night, and to think deeply about that. And that's your starting block, because then here's Tachi Ono. I had a really fun time doing Tachi Ono memes, actually. But what's my obsession? Customer value. That's the starting point. So once you've defined the value, you start to do mapping. And we had a great talk in Toronto about design thinking and process thinking and some of these terms. But what that is you basically, you take your value, what is it that people value. So in this milk farm to table example, it's farm to table milk, and you literally draw it out in a process. And so here the cow goes through the refrigerated milk tank thing and then gets shipped off to some kind of forklift, and then it winds up in the hands of a very happy, healthy human being. So contracts. How many people here have actually mapped their contract process? Okay, good. 2 hands. That's good, but that's not everyone here. This is something that I've worked with in the past, which is a contract life cycle, and it's a really useful way to actually map out the value of the contractual relationship. So there's ways that we can implement process maps. Now, does anyone want to take a stab at what this is? This is a process map for you getting your green card. So I really hope that there's some technologists in here that are going to look at this and help eliminate the waste from this equation, because obviously when we look at it and we draw it out, there's things to improve on. I've also found success in working with my IT team, and a lot of us work in tech, and you see these swim lanes, these flow charts, and I actually have started to use this with my department, and how do we sort of use this to navigate different legal issues or really a lot of contract stuff, when things are going from sales to the initial intake point, then to approval, finance. We can start to use these maps to basically map out the value stream. So once you've seen it, once you can visualize your map, you ruthlessly eliminate the muda. And here we're going to get back to the bolt, and it's the last bolt that tightens it. The rest is just motion. And so you think about this a little bit, but where is it there just motion? Because what we're trying to do is actually tighten the bolts and do the work. It's reducing the motion in the process where we start to eliminate the waste and really deliver that value more efficiently. So I was thinking about where's the motion here, and maybe it's drafting. You're frankly just taking too long to draft documents. Well, we had some great companies at Evolve Law that were doing automated drafting or clause libraries, where you've got a whole bunch of clauses in the cloud and you can just pull them down or analyze them quickly. Contractual data, contract management systems, making sure that data is quick. You're not wasting time going through shared drives or however you're managing it. User interfaces that just don't make sense, in terms of too many logins, there are too many applications. It's not intuitive. So I don't know. Does anyone here have an example of maybe a waste in their legal process that they want to share? I think that we could think of a few, but we don't have to. We don't want to. Anyways, the point here is that we need to eliminate waste and be ruthless, and we achieve flow, which is nice, and perfection and Kaizen. And so Kaizen is the last concept we'll just briefly touch on here, which is good change. And the idea here is that you're in this continual state of looking at your processes, looking at your department, and continually tweaking it and making sure that it gets better and better. This word kata is used, and that's your improvement routines. Using audits to find the problem before your client does. That's an example of kata. I think we don't typically do a lot of auditing unless we're being forced to. It's something that we could make a part of a process to make sure that we're finding errors, rooting them out. Doing technology landscaping, doing networking, finding out what is the new technology, what can we use, what can we test. Documenting standards and using contract playbooks, workflows, policy reviews, making sure policies are accessible, like all little things here that will help us achieve this state of continually kind of doing reflection and perfecting the process. So, I think sometimes a policy gets put out and then it just sits there for years and years. But Tatiana was a big fan of he would say, if the color of the paper has changed, you've been goofing off. Which means that they would literally put the policies all over Toyota, and then it was the job of the employees to actually continually kind of look at the system and think about how to make it better. So tons of different applications there, and I only got 10 minutes, but if you guys want to talk more, I'll be around. And this is a great book, The Lean Farm. Why again just are we doing a Darwin talk on microfarming? Because the microfarmers are today's Toyota. They're the masters of lean principles, and I think we can use legal tech to do more with less within our departments. So I hope that answers the question of what does farming have to do with evolved law. All right, that's all I got. Thank you, guys.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Jim Rosenfeld. I'm a partner at Davis Wright. This is our microphone, but I'll ask everybody to try to project. And I think we're in a cozy enough crowd here that we can all, speak up and hopefully everyone can hear us. The purpose of this panel, I think, has a lot to do with what Ian was talking about, and hopefully allowing us all to achieve Kaizen. I'm up here with four accomplished lawyers who have thought a lot about innovation in the workplace and incorporating technology and other types of solutions. And I know many of you, or most of you, I think, in this crowd are also in-house lawyers who are probably struggling with a lot of the same issues. So hopefully this conversation will get all of our juices flowing, and we'll have time to take questions at the end. And if you could, Liza, tell me when we're sort of to the point where we should be taking questions for the last 10 minutes or so, that would be great. So it's a tough time to be a lawyer. It's difficult, I think, whether you're an in-house lawyer or outside counsel, because we're receiving greater demands from our clients under tighter budgetary constraints. Technology is changing all the time. There's a call for greater solutions, and obviously always an imperative to improve the quality of our services. So we're going to just talk about all of that today, and we have a spectacular panel here with us to talk about those things. We have, starting from my right, your left, Vinay Jain, who is Senior Technology and IP Counsel at American Express on I believe, the Global Business Travel team. David Pashman, who's the General Counsel of Meetup, and Jenevra Georgini, who is at IAG as the Associate General Counsel of Digital and Business Services, and one of my partners, Lawton Penn, who is a partner at DWT, who's an employment partner and also heads up all of our innovation efforts, and the head of a firm-wide initiative called De Novo, which she'll tell you about. So I will start off by asking the panelists to introduce themselves a bit more, and I guess the question is sort of what's been your path from when you started to practice law to when you're here today, sitting on a panel and on lawyers and technology and innovation, how you've gotten here, and if we could start with that so people get a better sense of your practices.
I'm not really sure how I got here. Very serendipitous sort of path. So I went to law school at a time when the app economy, the mobile app economy, was just taking off. And I sort of got bitten by the bug, and I thought this is a really interesting area to work in, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I said if I ever had an app idea that I really wanted to pursue, I would do it, but in the meantime I've got loans to pay off, so I'm going to go work at Skadden. So that's what I did, thinking I'd be there for several years, and it turned out after about a year I had what at the time I considered to be a game-changing idea for an app that would revolutionize the way that people made social plans with each other. And so I quit the law firm, and I started working on the app full-time, worked with a development shop in India to build it. And you know, the motto of the lean startup methodology is to fail fast, and that's exactly what I did. Spectacularly. And so then there was this question of, well, what do I do with my career? Do I go back and work at another law firm? Do I do something else? And I was very lucky that I had a friend of mine who had just taken a job as the COO of a digital magazine and city guide called Flavor Pill. And they were looking for someone who, with a legal background, to be their head of business development, because they were trying to cut costs, and they wanted basically somebody who could be on the front end and the back end of every deal. So go negotiate a partnership and then go back to the office and write the contract. This was their thinking. And it actually, as simplistic as it sounds, it actually worked out really well. It worked out really well for me because I got this great skill set that combined legal and business thinking and made me a better, more business-minded lawyer, and it was also good for them because they hardly paid me anything. And so I did that for a little while, and then I got a phone call from another friend who had just received a round of seed funding prior to building even a prototype, which is unheard of these days, for a legal tech product, an app that would allow, aimed at freelancers and independent contractors and small businesses, to allow them to create, sign, and send contracts from their mobile device. And it was called Shake. And I came on board as part of the founding team of Shake. We raised a couple of rounds of funding, and then we were acquired 3 years later by Legal Shield, which was a great experience and a fantastic ride. And then sort of a consistent theme in my career is kind of thinking, okay, well, now what do I do next? Got a call from another friend, and she said, you should come work for this division of American Express. And I said, really? I'm a startup guy. I don't really know what I would do there. And she said, well, no, it's interesting because we've spun out from American Express, and we got a bunch of money from a private equity investor to basically go around the world and acquire startups. And I said, okay, great. What's the industry? It's B2B travel. And I said, well, I don't know anything about corporate travel. She said, it doesn't matter. You know about acquisitions, and you'll get to work on the opposite side now. You'll get to work on the buy side. So I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. So I came on board, and I've been there for not quite a year, and it's been very different from anything I've done before. And it's the first time I've had like a substantial outside counsel budget, which of course also comes with the pressures of maximizing the value that you get from that budget. Having been on the other side of that equation, I can totally kind of see the challenges that both sides of it present. So it's been an interesting journey, and I guess that's kind of how I got here. Sorry for the long spiel.
David?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm David Pashman, the General Counsel of Meetup. So I think I'm on the eve of my 20-year law school reunion this weekend, so my path here has certainly been long and winding. I started practicing in '97 at Skadden Arps when there was this innovative new legal technology called email sweeping. And I remember spending most of my time doing document productions trying to beat the FedEx deadline, because at that time in 1997 it was still not clear whether or not attorney-client privilege would be waived by emailing documents. So what people now do in 5 minutes, distributing merger agreements to 50 people. That was my career, basically. So if if the internet ever shuts down, I am fully employable. So I worked at Skadden for a little bit and was focused on technology transactions and wanted to get closer to the deals with the smaller client base, and so I went from Skadden to Brobeck, Flager, and Harrison, which I can say was one of the best technology law firms in the world because they don't exist anymore and no one can refute me. But I left before they dissolved, so you can't blame me for that, and went to work at a tech startup in California, and that was great until it wasn't. March of 2001, check the stock ticker. And so I traveled for about a year, so my long and winding road took me through the Himalayas back to New York, where I joined Wilson Sonsini, and I could continue Vinay's theme of got a call from a friend, because the guy that was starting Wilson Sonsini's New York office was someone I worked with at Skadden and Brobeck, and he had been leaving messages. The only contact number he had for me, because again, email was still really new, was my home phone number. And my mom was in the process of selling the house, and she's getting voicemails on the answering machine, again, cutting edge technology back then, trying to reach me, and she thought it was some debt collector, and so she never returned his call. And finally, I was having dinner with her one night, and she mentioned, this guy, Adam Denow, and I said, oh, Adam. And so I reconnected with him and worked at Wilson Sonsini for 5 years, and then I went to Meetup, who was a client of the firm's, but not a client that I had worked with. And so I've been at Meetup for about 7 years, doing focus mostly on legal in the beginning, and then getting more into business development and working really closely with the executive team. So if we look at sort of the spectrum of business with AIG and Amex at one end and a lemonade stand at the other end, I'm really close to the lemonade stand in terms of size of business and number of employees and size of legal teams. So I definitely leverage technology, but do it in ways that are probably very different than the rest of the folks on the panel.
Great. Jenevra?
Okay. I'm Jenevra Georgini. I started my practice sometime before the app revolution. I'll leave that there. Working at a law firm called Brown Raisman, where we dealt with such interesting issues as, so can trademark law actually apply to these URL things we keep hearing about? Spent a couple of years there, then got recruited to go to AIG, the big insurance company, and actually start up a group that focused just on online marketing and various outsourcing and technology issues. So, and the rest was history, 17 years of history to be exact. I've been there a while and have seen all the changes that have happened in the financial industry and with technology enabling that. And the latest wave of what we're doing now is trying to automate a lot of our legal process within the department. So I'm working quite a bit on that, and that's me.
Thanks. Lawton?
All right, so I've practiced law for 25 years, and I think, is that longer than you?
No?
Oh, shit. Because we didn't have email. I mean, that was like a big deal, and that showed up about 5 years into it. But after doing that for 25 years, I spend most of my time now trying not to think like a lawyer and reprogram myself. I work with our legal solutions design team, and a lot of what you'll hear us talking about is process mapping and technology and alternative staffing and data visualization and heat maps and failing fast and failing forward, which is easier said than done, let me say. So to live it, I have empathy. And I was thinking about what my pathway was, and I'm going to share with you something I've never said to anyone, but is something I am thinking a lot about today, is how is it I have abandoned a 25-year career and find myself trying to design new solutions and transform the legal industry. And I will trace it back to kind of two moments. So the first moment is when I showed up at the law firm 25 years ago, and I looked around, I said, you've got to be kidding. This is how it's done? Every litigation I worked on, the fees the lawyers were going to spend would outweigh any amount at issue. I saw all sorts of activities being done for reasons I absolutely had not a clue how that benefited the business or the client. And I became kind of really passionately dissatisfied about it, but really had no platform to do anything. And then when I was a fifth-year associate, I had my life change on a dime. At a moment where I got a phone call, and they said, your husband, who had only been married to 2 years, has had a grand mal seizure. And that moment turned into a 2.5-year period where we were frantically trying to solve an unsolvable problem. Brain tumors do not lend themselves to solutions. And I found myself kind of in the midst of teams of experts coming at it with different tool sets, different skills, different perspectives, all arguing and debating the right pathway. And the surgeons were saying, you have to do surgery. If you do radiation, the scarring will be worse than the tumor. The radiation people were literally saying to us, if you operate on him, you will kill him. Then you throw a naturopath into the mix, and got very confusing. So we were having to live with highly ambiguous situations, no clear path, lots of differing perspectives, make decisions, and not look back. And all through that, really my main role was being a holder of knowledge. I was the only one that sat in every single meeting, so a lot of times it was connecting the dots. And it's interesting, at the time, I remember saying, if we just had a way to share the knowledge of the world, I think cancer could be solved. We didn't have email yet. There was no internet. And now I look at IBM Watson and I just think, oh, it's maybe going to happen. But the other thing I was doing was being fiercely protective of my husband's interests. So I was watching this whole process through his eyes and trying to be laser focused on what are his needs and does this get his needs met. So after his death, if you thought I was dissatisfied before, the level of impatience and urgency with things like depositions, my sort of ability to tolerate inefficiencies, activities that don't add value, things that don't really move the dial forward. I mean, talk about life's too short to be spending time on this. So fast forward to today. I get to work with this amazing team of cross-disciplinary thinkers that come at it from different angles, technologists, process improvement experts, data analysts, folks who, like Ginny Chen in the audience, who approach it with staffing and people in the mix. And we're trying to solve problems that are nowhere near as complicated as a brain tumor, but they are real pain points for our clients. And to your point, Jim, it is much more complicated today to be a lawyer. The needs that are facing business, the amount of disruption happening every 6 months for a lot of our clients has never been like this. So for lawyers to stay really useful and relevant, we've got to start solving problems in different ways. And what I've noticed is the default tends to be to go talk to more lawyers. And we're really trying to change that at our firm and say, let's talk to some additional perspectives. Let's bring people in from other industries. Let's learn from lean farming. Let's learn from other professional services and try to solve it in a new way. So having a lot of fun, very satisfying, and I think that's maybe how I'm sitting here today. But I'll let you know as I continue to play with this concept.
Thank you all. So we're here to talk about solving problems and sort of new ways of solving problems. And as you've heard, we have a number of different perspectives on that. And Jenevra, I think I'll start with you, because the one comment you made as we were sort of preparing for this panel was just the increase in volume of how much is coming at you and how quickly. And I know you've been involved in some legal automation projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you would talk about that to the crowd here.
Sure. So going back to that theme of doing more with less, definitely a big priority for us, and it's just become exponential in terms of the workload. As a highly regulated company, we have to deal with 51 different jurisdictions in terms of the states. We have international regulators to deal with. We have regulators who differ by subject area, whether it's in the financial world or the privacy world, and we have the Fed as well, of course. So each of these entities requires a lot of reporting, a lot of documentation. There are fines, there are reputational penalties if we don't comply with each and every one of these separate regimes. And that's just something that's ripe for automation. And our immediately prior general counsel was somebody who came in and said, I want to, quote, start a revolution. And this was somebody who really embraced technology and in true corporate fashion did this by creating numerous working groups that then went forth and did projects. And our incoming GC has picked up on that as well. So you have lawyers who are really being forced to collaborate with their IT partners. And despite being a big company with everybody being in very specialized roles, I think it's worked very well in terms of the right people talking to each other and most importantly being motivated in the right way. I mean, people's bonuses depend on this at this point, and you can be sure it's going to get done.
So what specific types of automation are you talking about?
So in the legal world, it's really pretty wide-ranging. We have everything from document management to an intake app that's being developed. So again, going back to the idea of what do clients want? Well, clients want a transparent relationship with their lawyers. They want to see, okay, I know who's looking at this contract. I know if it has to go to somebody else, I know who is the somebody else. If it's with the other side, I know how many days it's taken. So that's something that is being implemented right now as we speak on the network.
Okay, great. And I have a lot of questions on my list, but I want to encourage all of you to jump in if something sparks a thought and you want to add anything to any of these comments. But let me go next to you, David, because you said you were at the other end of the spectrum, at the lemonade stand of the spectrum.
No, just to this side of the lemonade
Just this
stand.
side of the lemonade stand. So David's got a 2-person legal group.
Correct.
Is that right? And not the resources of an AIG.
Right.
And
Which are not all that, by the way.
And so I think from talking to you, you've had a lot more experience with sort of jerry-rigging existing systems
Right.
to adapt to things that you've had to do to serve your in-house
Yeah,
clients. Can you talk
exactly.
about
I
that?
think and the reason I've done that, sort of doing more with the existing tools as opposed to developing my own apps or maybe using third-party services is it's both budgetary constraints, but then also internal, just for lack of a better term, political reasons. I need to go where my business teams are as opposed to getting them to use my tools or processes. So I could probably get budget to purchase and implement a contract management system, but it wouldn't work well for what I need to do, and I don't have the team and I don't have the time myself to actually do the setup and the configuration. So contract management and intake is a huge problem. The volume has increased significantly, almost, I don't know where it came from, but it seemed to happen right around the time I hired my first associate general counsel, which is fortunate. And we had no intake system, and so people would email him a contract saying, "Hey, can you look at this?" Or with no context, with no business context, with no timing, and the response to the question of when do you need it was always immediately or as soon as possible. So then I would jump in and I would say, listen, immediately is not the right answer unless your desk is on fire and he's the only one that has the fire extinguisher. So tell me what's going on, because I need to prioritize my workload the same way the project managers or product managers need to prioritize their workload around features that they're going to launch. They can't do everything all at once. So we just created a really simple contract management process using Google Forms and an integration with Trello, which is a project management software. So anytime someone emails us or sends us a Slack message with a contract, it triggers an email that sends them to this Google survey that asks a bunch of questions, and then that goes into Trello with all the information, and then we can manage that. And then just one sort of contextual point around that, which relates really closely to what Ian is saying in the Failing Fast, is the initial instinct for a lot of people who are lawyers is to make everything perfect, because your training is that comma could cost you $1 million and that memo cannot have a typo. And so I can imagine a world in which I could have obsessed over this form, this intake form, for weeks, but leaning on the principles of not just lean startup but agile software development, I said, you know what, let's A/B, well, we didn't A/B test, but I said, let's just launch this and get some people to test it and get feedback from them and then iterate on this survey rather than spending 3 months coming up with the perfect survey. So we'll take some simple contracts from other people in the business operations team that can partner with us, kind of like beta testers, and we'll let them try out the survey and give us feedback. And then we iterated on that, and then we launched it to the entire company. And so, not just so one of the ways that I leverage technology is not just leveraging the actual hardware or software, but it's leveraging the methodologies of technology companies, whether they be lean or agile or split testing or iterating. And perfection does not have to be the ultimate goal. So that's just an example of how I approached that contract intake process, realizing that getting something out there and having people use it and getting feedback and improving it was more important than making it perfect the first time around. And granted, I could do that because the stakes are a little bit lower at Meetup than they might be at AIG, in that we're not highly regulated and we're not a publicly traded company. But I think those principles can apply selectively to a lot of what we're doing. And then secondly, I mentioned sort of I need to go to where my business teams are and use their tools. As much as I might, sort of laugh at email as being a 15-year-old technology, I still think it's a great tool for what we do. But most of the rest of the company where I work uses Slack, which is a real-time chat software. Does anyone not know what Slack is? It's like Facebook Messenger for businesses, and it's great for real-time, geographically distributed, collaborative conversations, but it's horrible for workflow and task management. So I tried to tell people, don't send me anything on Slack. If you need me to do it, you need to email it to me. But that doesn't work, because if the engineers are in Slack, they're gonna engage me in Slack. So there's really simple integrations, whether it's this service called If This Then That or Zaplets, that basically automate tasks. So anytime someone sends me an email or sends me a Slack with an attachment, I can trigger an email that then goes into my inbox so that it doesn't get lost in all of the Slack chatter. So it's just thinking about how I can basically go to where the business teams are and then leverage existing off-the-shelf technologies to make my life a little bit easier.
Great. And Vinay, can you talk about any recent challenges that you've had that you've sort of turned to technology or some other types of innovation to respond to?
Yeah, I think the point that David made about the process of sort of what you see in technological development, in addition to just the technology itself, is a really important one. I came into my current role as somebody, as I mentioned before, who really had not worked with outside counsel on a large scale, and kind of the sort of perspective that I had on it was coming from I was actually a really bad client, I think, when I was working at these smaller companies, because I was only working with like one or two outside counsel at a time at the most, and very limited budget, and I would pretty much be in touch with my outside counsel, like if not daily, then every couple of days. Where are you on this? How much have you spent? Where are we getting close to the cap that we set?
We love that.
Yeah. And somehow they didn't fire me as a client, but I'm sure that I annoyed them. Now I can't do that, because there's just too much work. I'm probably working with, at any given moment, a half dozen counsel at 4 or 5 different firms, and there's just a bunch of stuff to do. And so, curiously, like, there wasn't already a system in place to sort of monitor where you were mid-month, mid-billing cycle on your bills. And so, my initial approach was to turn to the internet's killer app, email, which is still good after all these years, and basically just start to check in with my outside counsel, and then that evolved into, well, why don't I have them check in with me proactively, and then that evolved into, well, why don't I actually get them to sort of set up a barometer in terms of like where we are relative to our cap, and then just let me know as we're getting close. And so there's room for improving all of that. Right now it's a very manual process, and I think on the consumer side, I forget what it's called, but there's a company that's building or has built an app that will allow you to sort of monitor in real time what your lawyers are spending. We use, I think, which probably most corporate in-house legal departments use, we use Serengeti, sort of to track our bills. But if anyone's used it, and apologies in advance if anyone here is like
Bernadette, one of the founders.
No. Good feedback. That's part of it.
This is
Real time.
I will say, as a new user to it, it wasn't immediately intuitive to me. But I also didn't sit through the training, so that's on me. But yeah, I think that those are the kinds of things that we I'm sort of, as I'm coming to understand kind of the full scope of it, my thought process is let's find a technological solution. The difficulty is I can't go and create a Trello account or a Slack account because of corporate information security standards, right? And so any third-party tool that we use has to be vetted by our 3-month-long process. And so so that creates a challenge, like trying to modernize your process in the context of using relatively old and not innovative tools, which is something I've never had to deal with before.
Right.
So I just wanted to pick up on that and say I've had obviously similar experience with the very regulated environment, but I read a great quote recently, which is people hate change but love experiments, and if it can be presented as an experiment, what if we just use Yammer for a company-wide chat about social things and the status of our various initiatives, then I found that can be a good, I don't know if you have the same experience.
Give that a shot.
That sounds like a great tip.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to this discussion is a lot of what we here at in-house counsel are hungry for is that transparency. It's visibility into the portfolio matters, visibility into the spend. And what we have found is that most law firms and most companies have tools that can allow that. It's just a matter of doing it. Right. So what we find, so Serengeti billing is useful, except for that occurs at the end of the month when the law firm submits the bill electronically. So what we've done with a number of clients is just use a simple extranet that you might have for deal rooms and other kinds of communication, and we have coded it so they can come in and see the time as it's being entered and closed every evening by the lawyers on all of their matters as it's accumulating and who's spending what time in the mix. That wasn't very hard. So I think for in-house counsel, you simply need to ask. And there are systems, and there's SharePoint. A lot can be done there. And I think one of the main messages I would have is we do have existing technology, and I know Jenevra's really focused on the user experience. And I look at it sometimes as people can have a bucket of paint and they can slap something up and go, oh yeah, that's awful, we need to get a whole new material. Well, what if you actually brought in an artist that knows how to do something with that paint? And I've been struck by how much progress we can make with someone who actually knows how to design nice skins and interfaces with something like SharePoint, which isn't the most beautiful product behind the scenes. And so we've been spending a little more time on that rather than try to find the new technology, but can we pretty up with a minor amount of development and sort of a blending of multiple applications and tools so that it suddenly just feels more modern and friendly and easier to work with. And we've had some success there because doing more than with less, we don't have a lot of budget either. And we've definitely learned the mistake of spending too much time trying to create something and go, ta-da! And everyone's like, well, that's cool, but can it do X, Y, Z? And we realized the real solution is the X, Y, Z, not what we've just spent all this time working on. So I'm with you, David. Get it out there and just see. I call it early and ugly, and just see, are we even close? Are we even partially on the right track? Because that's when the real learning starts to happen.
Right. That's great. Well, Lawton, you have visibility into a lot of clients and what sorts of challenges they've faced and what sorts of innovations they're looking for. You talked about sort of visibility into billing information. What are the other main types of challenges that people sort of come to Davis Wright with again and again? What are the big ones for our clients?
Yeah, so we call it the 3 Ps. We put it in these buckets of profitability, peace of mind, and professional advancement. If we can solve those problems for our clients, we tend to have a lot of loyalty. So in the profitability category, it's how do we get a body of work done more cost effectively? So you start with process, get all the waste out of the process by just even mapping it. You learn so much by just mapping a process and asking, why do we do it that way? And then at every step saying, do we need to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Would technology be a solution? Is there a lower cost provider? So getting efficiency out, or inefficiency out. Also in profitability is predictability. So that goes to the visibility, having real budgets and having the ability to track to that. And then in peace of mind, it's using SharePoint and other tools, Tableau or Power BI, to visualize data, to be able to see our portfolio matters in the process so things don't fall through the cracks. And also having really good systems, so we can at some point tell stories about systems we've designed that really do minimize the chance that something's going to fall through the cracks, so that our clients can kind of sit back and relax and know that it's all being handled well and they can see it flowing through the system. And then professional advancement, what I call that is, a lot of our in-house counsel tell us that they really struggle to communicate value. They struggle to communicate even what they accomplished in a year or how the money was spent. And so we think a lot about how do we help our clients set some goals for the year, map to the company's goals that have implications for legal, and then help them communicate what they accomplished at the end of the year, whether that's through, or even throughout the year, whether that's through visualizations, charts, annual reports, things that both create value, that's tied to the company strategy, but then communicates it in a way that the business people understand, which lawyers don't train to do typically. But we hear that a lot, that just, I walk in, I sit down with a room of executives from across the company, and I feel very vulnerable. I've got my yellow legal pad. We don't track things. I can't generate reports. You know, the marketing, finance, operations, they're managing huge budgets to within 1%, and I can't tell them what bills I'm going to get at the end of the month from my legal team. So we hear that a lot, and that's a lot of what we try to focus on solving for as well.
Well, let me ask any of you whether they fit into
what I miss
buckets or not. What are the areas that are most ripe for innovation, or areas you wish you had a good technology or other solution for?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it is on the small to medium business side, contract management. So when I joined Meetup, there weren't a lot of things that I missed about a law firm. The nice office was one of them, and the cab ride homes was another. But the one thing I did miss was the document management system. I always knew how to find something because it was highly structured database with client matter numbers and who worked on it and et cetera. But moving to a smaller company like Meetup, the documents could be on my local drive, in my email, on Dropbox, on Google Drive, on Box. There's just multiple different sources, and then if it's in Google Drive, I don't remember, did I create it or did someone share it for me? And then version control was a real challenge because things are going through email, and this is not something that's going to keep normal people up at night, but it keeps lawyers up at night. So I investigated SMB contract management solutions, and I didn't find anything that worked. Most of the solutions I found were enterprise solutions that were focused on audit trails and routing review. And that wasn't what I cared about. What I cared about was keeping track of versions and then keeping track of the information in the contract once it was signed, like when is the renewal date and when is the notice period and things like that. I mean, I didn't have to worry about MFNs or non-competes, but larger companies might. And I couldn't find anything that really worked. So I tried to create my own using Bento, which is a database, and I failed. And then
Did you fail forward?
I think I flailed a little bit before I failed. Okay. And then I basically just settled on Excel, and I created my own database basically in Excel. But that's getting really unwieldy, and so if any of you know of or want to start a contract management solution that addresses the needs of small businesses, I think that there's an opportunity because I'm in a few GC groups and we're all sort of asking each other periodically what we use. And it's all about trying to sort of retrofit things that don't really work.
And I hear a lot about contract management, and the one area I'm seeing pretty rapid uptake, even just in the last year, is document automation. So using tools to allow businesses to answer questions and get basic contracts to go, or in-house counsel at a higher level creating through Contract Express or Leaflet or Xari contract automation tools. I'm surprised at how that we're starting to experiment inside our firm with corporate formation documents in our corporate group using Contract Express to get more consistent, better quality templates underway. So I've been impressed by the rapid uptake, I think, of document automation. It must be really solving a need. But the contract management continues to be a real pain point I hear about.
Yeah, and to the extent that you all are not in-house lawyers, you're legal technologists in the legal field, and so be interested to hear during the question period if you have any thoughts about particular products or solutions that sort of meet this need.
Yeah, also on the theme of contracts, it would be great to have something that takes it a step further and really does more contract analytics. So right now, I and my team are sort of the institutional memory, and we say, you know what, you shouldn't put that clause in there because 5 years later, you're going to be fighting about whether, how do you do the true up on pricing? And clients don't believe us. They haven't been there for as long as we have, and they don't have those same sensitivities. So if we had some analytics that we could run against contracts and actually predict, here's what this risk profile is going to look like X years out, that would be immensely helpful, and especially in the insurance world.
We're starting to see some of that. There are a couple that are really interesting.
I know there are a few that show how you deviate from templates, so if there's
deviate
more.
from templates, but also as contracts are running through the system, they're crowdsourcing to be able to say, do you realize that provision only shows up in 7% of all contracts? It's a highly unusual. Or if you're going to have this kind of indemnification, 95% of the time this is the commercially reasonable. So there's sort of this concept of kind of crowdsourcing to give you the analytics to go back to the business people and say, I said what you're asking for is kind of unreasonable, but it really is statistically proven to be unreasonable because nobody does it.
So who's the crowd doing the sourcing? Because if there are litigators who can help interpret that, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So Law Geeks is trying to tackle this, and they're out of Israel. And then Crux IQ is one of the Microsoft accelerator companies in India, and they're doing this. And there are a few others that we're following and demoing and kind of paying attention to. And I think what's interesting for companies like AIG or Amex, if you find one of these companies, they would love to beta test. You may get for free. Sorry to legal tech out there. Like, no, we're trying to make money. But they're so hungry for use cases and testing in safe, controlled environments. So we've been trying to figure out how can we start doing more of that beta testing in a controlled way, and having the advantage of designing it just as we would like it for certain projects. Very cool. But I'll send you more information.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be, there's no simple solution to this, obviously, but it would be amazing to be able to have more predictability in terms of your spend, right? And you think about it from the standpoint, legal can't be the only industry where you're dealing with unpredictability and variability based on matters that might arise. How do they do it in other industries? Maybe there's like an actuarial model that we can figure out that would allow you to sort of reasonably predict, based on similarly situated companies that have maybe anonymized in an anonymized, aggregated way, make it a big data problem, right? And figure out like what can we do, what can we derive from other companies in our industry or similar companies to figure out, okay, well, this is a reasonable estimate of what you're going to end up spending, because it's a little bit even at a large company, it's a little bit seat of your pants. You don't actually know. You give a very conservative estimate, and you hope that you conservative from the standpoint of being high, and then you hope that you come under that, and that's kind of all there is to it right now. There's got to be a greater level of sophistication that we can employ to actually predict it.
I mean, so one of the budget and sort of financial forecasting is expense forecasting is something that when I first started was in a very different place than it is now. When I first joined Meetup, basically CFO said, use your professional judgment, spend the money like it was your own, but you don't have a budget. That was helpful and provided me a lot of flexibility, but now we're advanced to the point where that doesn't happen. So I still do have to predict out, but there are certain exogenous things that will greatly influence my budget that I can't predict, like a patent litigation or a marketing decision to redesign the logo that then triggers international filings that are going to be $100,000. So Fortunately, the organization is still small enough where they understand that I can't predict those things. But for larger projects, like if I was going to do a global tax compliance audit, those are the kind of things that I need to predict and budget.
Interesting. I mean, that's certainly an area on which we inside the law firms are stressing out about all the time. And if I can ask a self-interested question, I mean, what can outside counsel do to sort of help be part of the solution on those sort of budgetary legal spend issues, other than charging less?
Fixed fee.
Yeah.
I mean, if I know what it's going to cost me, then I can budget for it. But if I never want to be in the position of trying to buy a Ferrari for the price of a Hyundai, so I will never try and force outside counsel to do $100,000 worth of value for $25,000 worth of work. But I need to know before I engage with anyone what it's going to cost me, because I can't, I need that predictability for those projects.
Absolutely.
And what sorts of barriers have you all faced in innovating and adopting technology solutions or other types of solutions? I mean, Vinay, you talked about sort of the reluctance of others in your company to allow you, I think, to experiment with new technology or to adopt new technologies. Is that one of them, or are there any other barriers you would want to sort of comment on?
Yeah, that's a big one, and I think the reason that it's significant is that it goes beyond just the reality. I mean, there's a good reason for that policy. Like, we're dealing with sensitive data, and I mean, I wouldn't, as an Amex lawyer, I wouldn't use the technology that my last startup built 3 months into us launching the product, because I mean I know what the vulnerabilities were, and I wouldn't trust it. So the process is there for a reason, but I think the danger of it is that it goes beyond the process and it starts to sort of infect your mindset. And when you start to think about the universe of tools that you can use as being the ones that are already there, then your curiosity dies, and you stop thinking about these as problems that can actually be solved, and you get into the big company mindset of, okay, well, we're doing this because it's the way that it's always been done.
So can I ask a question? Are you saying that you're only allowed to use third-party tools that have been pre-approved? Or, because I can imagine a scenario where you could easily use Trello for project management, but not provide any client or sensitive data. Is that not something that's within the business rules that would allow?
So I mean, yeah, there's sort of exceptions for black box kind of projects where we're not using customer data,
Mm-hmm.
we're not using real data, just on an experimental basis. But pretty much anything that's going to be interacting with our systems has to go through that review process, and it's a 3-month process. So it's not impossible to get through it, and it's not impossible to come on the other side and actually be able to start working with the product, but it takes time. And so that idea of experimenting and failing fast is not really an option. So then you sort of think about trying to work within the tools that you have. So okay, well great. We have this intranet that we can post documents to. Okay, well let's create a toolkit for people on the business side when they're getting ready to create low risk, low value contracts, so that legal doesn't have to be part of that at all. Just literally give them everything that they need. And it's 20-year-old technology. You're literally going and downloading Word documents and working with them. But it's sort of a kludge, but it works, right? Like people get what they need out of it, and legal can focus its time on more important things. So that's kind of the workaround sort of mindset.
And anyone else have thoughts about sort of barriers that you faced in trying to adopt new innovations or new technologies?
Sure. So one barrier is sort of either the all or nothing mentality. So just as a case in point, I built this chatbot prototype that responded directly to something our clients were unhappy about. We have maybe 1,600 different entities. It's very difficult to figure out who signs contracts. So I built a little, like customer service type bot. You can bring it up on the web, you can bring it up on the phone, and it says, okay, I have this kind of contract. It's in this country. It is related or not related to insurance. Okay, here's your signing entity. And it was a simple prototype in Motion.ai, and the next step was to try and get some IT folks to help build this out. Well, call with the IT folks. We determined they need $150,000 to go forward, and they need 6 months to do all the IVR. And I'm saying, but there's no IVR, it's web-based, there's nothing, you don't need any of this. Well, that's what we have. We're locked into this technology. I don't know, maybe you could get a use case to do it on AWS as an exception, and that'll take you 12 months instead of 6 months. So it was from the perspective of, we'll build out this huge project that touches everybody. And they're saying, oh, how many uses do you expect? 5,000 uses a day, 10,000? I'm like, no, it's 100 uses a month, if that. So it would be great to have some kind of process that accommodates just a smaller, more localized tech thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Have you had success leveraging the technology of your vendors, law firms, legal process outsourcers? So you're not trying to acquire it, you almost use your vendors as sort of software as a service.
I think that's a great idea. One of the things that the light bulbs that went off when you were making that point earlier is I might not be able to build it in-house, but I can ask you to do it for me. That would be awesome.
Well, we've designed tech
yeah.
for legal departments at technology companies because that's not their core business.
Right.
Law is a law firm's core business. I've also heard of in-house counsel getting a lot of leverage out of LPOs and their the incredible data and reports and contract management that they can provide because you've got the infrastructure. So I was just thinking, if I was in-house counsel, I would lean on and try to kind of leverage those systems maybe and think of them more as subscriptions or part of a fixed fee portfolio where that's part of what you're also getting. Maybe helps accelerate the internal approvals and acquisitions. Because I hear that all the time, all sorts of layers of review to get it done.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I guess another thing I wanted to ask you along the lines of barriers is, some of the barriers we're coming up with are barriers from above, sort of corporate reluctance to allow innovation, or at least roadblocks they've thrown in. And I think that a lot of the, perhaps a lot of the barriers to innovation come from the nature of lawyers themselves, and or like the pool of people that's self-selected to become lawyers. Do you think that's the case, Lawton?
Yeah, Lawton.
Yeah, we were trained to innovate, and we're so focused on, having the answer, getting it right, having it perfect. We have things like malpractice that just sort of limit us and make us concerned. What I found the best success, though, is find a real pain point and solve a small problem. And a lot of times, it doesn't take much, and then suddenly people kind of start following along and they get excited. What doesn't work is to try to train a bunch of lawyers saying, you ought to learn this contract automation tool because it's good for you, it's going to make your practice more efficient. It's like telling kids to eat vegetables. You have to have a real project, a real often client saying this has to be done in a different way or at a different price point. So there's this urgency. And then you make it easy in little bits. And then it moves along. But it's a harder environment in which to change things up, try to create things that didn't before exist, ask how we can do it better, break down all models, because our whole profession looks to precedent. We always go to where's the most recent form, and we incrementally improve it, but it's it's sort of like you don't want your accountants being creative. There's not a lot of desire to kind of just start and build it from the ground up, but a lot of what we need to do as an industry, I think it requires just that.
Right. Are we sort of to Q&A time? Is that?
Yeah.
So about 5 to 10 minutes.
Sure. Let me open it up to questions. We've covered a lot of ground here, and love to hear questions or any comments from the crowd. Suzanne.
So this is not a setup for Lawton because
Oh,
I'm one of
answer
her
it then.
colleagues, but as lawyers, we deal with so much data, and there was some mention of data. And I'm an M&A lawyer by trade, and we review all these contracts, and there's all sorts of nuggets of data in there. And I'm sure in-house too. I mean, when you're dealing with contracts and all this information embedded in those contracts that could be useful to the business. And I'm just curious if you're when you do routine reviews of contracts. Are you trying to extract some of that data to use in different ways? So an example that I've thought of, I don't know if anyone's doing this, but when you do diligence, if you're a buyer and you're looking through all these contracts, and we look for non-competes and non-assignment clauses, but there's other information in there, like where's sales offices, how many employees, and that would be really useful information in the integration of the business if you're a buyer. But in-house, you must have huge amounts of data. And I'm just wondering if you try to capture any of that when you're doing your day-to-day legal work and figure out how to use it to help the business.
Yeah, so, and this is perfect because I didn't quite get to my data question.
Oh, okay. Well, that was not a setup.
Yeah, perfect setup. So, but anyone want to speak to that, uses of data in your in-house legal practice?
I think we're just starting to cross that barrier. We just started using a contract management platform suite that has that capability, but nobody's turned it on, partly because it's sort of the eat your vegetable problem, right? Everyone has to invest a lot of time on the front end to upload all of their documents, to learn how to use it, to upload all their documents, to get the value out. Meanwhile, the client is knocking down your door for a contract review. That takes precedence. I wonder if part of the reason, though, that it has not been more widely adopted is also a reluctance on the part of lawyers to let go of playing that role, of what's market and sort of being the authority in the room on, which contract provision is appropriate or whether it's an outlier. I do think there's maybe a little element of protectionism there, perhaps. I'm not sure.
So I'm not exerting any effort in that direction. I know that there are a lot of companies that are trying to develop platforms for that, and one of them, I think, is Noah Weisberg.
Kira.
Kira system.
Yeah, and so I think there's a lot of promising platforms that can provide that solution, but that's not something that I focused on yet.
Yeah, I think we should all be probably doing a lot more of it. The way I see it play out is somewhat more informally, in that insurance products will come or product managers will come and ask lawyers about, what are typical risks you see in cyber risk, or what are you seeing in terms of intellectual property indemnities. So that's how we participate.
Well, with the sort of profusion of data, are there new metrics by which the in-house lawyers are measured? Are there new metrics now?
Well, we actually tried to get ahead of that by keeping our own metrics, and the things that we focused on were things like turnaround time, size of contracts, number of hours spent. Yes, unfortunately, we do have to somewhat track our hours, not to you guys' level, but so yes.
Great. Other questions?
So people have mentioned a couple times, I wish there was a tool that did this. And a lot of times there are entrepreneurs out there building that. How do you find out about them, and how would you prefer to find out about them? We have at Evolve Law our legal tech toolkit, but I think that there's a lot of stuff happening that maybe you just don't know about. So how should you be finding out about them if you're not doing it already?
So, when I was looking for contract management solutions, I was just creatively Googling and was hoping that
That's how we solve all our problems.
Exactly. I do a lot of lawyering that way too. And then also,
don't give away this.
Exactly. And then speaking with my network. So I would like to think that if entrepreneurs are building the solutions, they're going to find the ways to reach me as the market. Yeah, so I would, certainly not by cold sales emails, because that's definitely not the way I want to find out about them. But I don't know. I think actually someone mentioned, maybe it was someone on the panel mentioned the free, people who are developing this technologies want to provide them for free to people to trial and perfect in a closed environment. And I think that's the best way for me to find out about it. If Vinay tells me that he's got a solution that works, I'm going to believe him after one sentence more so than I'm going to believe someone that's trying to sell me.
We've got the theme of you call a friend.
Exactly. Call a friend. Or meet the friend for drinks, one of the two.
Laszlo.
Yeah, I want to follow up on your question on kind of skill set, professional skills. We all have great analytical skills and all that, but one of the key skills you need as in-house is project management. Project management, I think when I started as a lawyer, was not a profession. Now there are levels of project. These people are professionals at what they do, and we're not. How do you kind of either teach yourself project management skills or kind of leverage the project management skills of your colleagues in-house to really, whether it's GDPR compliance or whatever else, take kind of the problem and kind of make it happen?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's one of the biggest challenges that I had transitioning from a firm to in-house, because as a firm lawyer, I always had someone telling me what my priorities were, whether it was a partner or the client. But in-house, there's no one telling me what my priorities are. That's something that I need to do on my own. So certainly technology is a part of it, and I use Trello, which is, I think it's a great platform. There's others out there that is visual project management that allows me to collaborate, prioritize, categorize, set due dates. It's really simple, and it's a New York homegrown startup. Well, at least they used to be. I think they were acquired. But another part of it is just really thinking about prioritization in the context of the business. It's not about, as a lawyer, your job is or a firm lawyer, your job is to create revenue by billing. But apologies, Lynn and Jim. But I don't create value by doing work. I create value by solving business problems. So I need to think about my priorities in the context of what's the biggest business problem that I can solve, and compare that. And then sometimes I just don't do things. I've got stuff on my to-do list from the first day that I started, and I don't have to. I'm not doing them because there's no client forcing me to do them because they're going to pay me money. They just haven't become a priority because they're not solving a business problem. So learning how to not do things and saying no is, whether it's learning how to say no to things that you as a lawyer know you really need to do, but it's not solving a business problem, or learning how to say no to some internal client, and that's a little bit harder. Generally, it's a not now as opposed to no, but there's plenty of times where I've had to explain to people why there wasn't a way to do that thing, because that thing wasn't as important as the other thing. And so again, I bring it back to using the lean methodologies that Ian talked about, and product managers at my company. Meetup is a very product-focused company. So if I was a product manager for a team, let's say member engagement, I wouldn't build every single feature that someone else in the company came to me and told me would be a good idea. I would think about what is the feature that is going to create the best experience for the user that's going to help the company grow. So if I manage the legal function in the same way and think about what is the best thing I can do today or this week or this month for the business, then that's going to help me prioritize. And then there's plenty of books that I've read also, which I don't remember the names of them, but Google can tell you. There was one book that maybe some of you read. It was by David somebody about prioritization. No, when I said that to someone else, they knew.
Google will tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazon.
Yes,
Amazon.
exactly. How to Get Things Done, I think, was the name of the book. Yes.
Well, there you go.
Getting
It worked.
Yep. Crowdsourcing.
It's kind of like Google. Vinay or Jenevra, any other thoughts on that question on sort of the project management aspects of the role?
Just the one you had mentioned at the end of your question there, the idea of, how do you sort of share this knowledge like with your team. I've never been part of a multi-lawyer legal team until now, as sort of a team of one. And like lawyers tend to be islands. They tend not to be particularly collaborative. And so one of the things that I'm sort of trying to think about now is how do I get us working more like a team? I mean, people are incredibly supportive and will help you out. You need somebody to take over a project for you because you're sick or busy, then they'll step right in. But thinking about it a little bit differently from that, sort of maybe trying to mirror the way that product teams work, where you have sort of, you're all working towards a common goal, but you have specializations within the team, and it's one matter, but you're each taking a different piece of it, as opposed to sort of the lawyer as an island model, which is, this is my internal client, this is my matter, I own this entire thing. And there are benefits to doing it that way as well. You can actually start to develop a deeper knowledge of a particular internal client, but I don't have an answer here. I'm just sort of thinking about, an alternative way of thinking about it, which is where we maybe can start thinking more in terms of taking each member of a legal team taking on a different piece of the same matter, and then, literally meeting, this concept of actually like sitting around a table together and working on a legal problem with other lawyers as a group, I think is something that I haven't seen a whole lot of. It might be worth trying.
Okay, well, thank you all. I want to really thank our panelists so much for their great insights.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to spend the last 5 minutes here actually touching on a lot of things that our speakers did. So a little bit about me. I'm Bernadette Bulacan. So I was actually, you can either hiss at me, I was one of the founding team members of a small company back in 2000 called Serengeti. So what's also funny is I also started my practice at Venture Law Group. So like David and I have probably been on deals when I was like but a baby lawyer. But it's really funny because I was on a panel in Toronto a few days ago, and I was thinking, gosh, I was part of Serengeti in 2001, 2002, which means that I've been in legal tech, do the math, for a really long time, actually. So I've had the good fortune. We were acquired by Thomson Reuters a few years ago, and rather than one of the things that I wanted to do when I stayed on was the industry was in great flux, right? You can imagine it was 2008, 2009. And so I was given the opportunity to work with a lot of legal departments of one, Uber departments. And part of it was maybe like having them understand more about Serengeti. We're going to talk. I'm going to evangelize and lead the way for you, because we've got tools for that. But what's been really interesting to me are some of the conversations, because when we first started to talk about Serengeti, it was not sexy. It was like, hey, your law firm just charged you 10 cents for black and white copies, and your audit guidelines say they should only be 3 cents. Check. So I mean, that was part of it. That was part of it. But now we've moved on, and it's what the panel touched on. There's much greater focus on, all right, I sit on all of this data, so how am I going to demonstrate that value? So Lawton touched on this. So one of the best stories that I've heard, because I was having this conversation about like, how do you demonstrate value as a general counsel, and having dinner with a young general counsel. He's like, oh, I've got the perfect story. He was like, I was a young general counsel in an Uber large technology company, and I had just been designated the new general counsel of the division. And so it was my first ELT meeting, my first executive leadership team meeting. So what do? I took my handy dandy yellow pad of paper, right? It's our sword and I guess the pen's our sword, and the yellow pad our shield. He's like, I went to my head of litigation and I said, what major matters do we have? Do you know how much we have spent on it? And he writes down his little bullets. He goes to his M&A counsel, asks the same thing, writes it down on his yellow piece of paper, and proudly strides into the boardroom. He's literally at the table to everything he's ever wanted. He's in the C-suite. And so his counterparts go up, and it's the head of sales. And what does the head of sales do? Puts up a PowerPoint, a chart, data, numbers, pictures. He's like, okay, that was interesting. No one told me that there'd be PowerPoint involved today. And then the head of research goes up, and what does he do? Throws up a PowerPoint, charts, numbers, pictures. And each of the leaders that he's at the table with, literally and figuratively, does the same thing. They are business leaders that get up and they talk about their people, their resources, their work, and they all do the same thing. They throw up a PowerPoint and talk about numbers, data, metrics. And he's thinking to myself, God, that is not how I learn, right? Like, what is our mantra in law school? And it's what he had on his yellow pad of paper. Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. right? That is how we live and die when we're lawyers. And he realized that his business counterparts don't have that mantra. And their mantra was much different. Their mantra was numbers, pictures, stories, right? All of his counterparts that were around the table talked about what they did, what their teams did, how they consumed resources, their contributions with numbers, pictures, stories. And what do they say, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, here's the picture of my career, which I think is 1,000 words. And the other thing that I always touch on is, right, none of us went to law school because of our great math acumen and prowess. I mean, this picture tells you about my comfort about math. But it's one of those skills that you have to develop, especially when you go in-house. And that might be if you're a department of one or if you are in an Uber department. And you might have large data sets and you might have small data sets. But you need to start picking out those data points that will tell your story. And so that's what I hope to do in the next 3 minutes, is to actually share with you some of the stories, data, pictures that have been shared with me. Because I think it's very hard conceptually as lawyers to think about, how do I talk about myself that way, especially when you're in-house, right? Because you don't get the value of saying, aha, I billed 2,005 hours. We collected 98% of that, right? You don't have that when you're in-house. The other thing that you'll notice when you go in-house is there's a lot of goal setting, right? Like every year, you go into your performance management and you set out some goals. And the reason why I've been really focused on making SMART goals, and you'll hear that term all the time when you're thinking about performance management, is that this is the reason why you need numbers, picture, stories, right? You need to have specific goals, the what are you going to do, how you're going to do it, why you want to do it, very specific. The measurable goals, and then again, we'll talk about how you'll demonstrate how you measure it. You want them to be attainable, right? You don't want them to be unattainable, but you want to feel that stretch, and you want to be able to demonstrate that it was a stretch. The R is funny because I see sometimes I see it as relevant, like, is this a meaningful goal for the business? I also see it as realistic, like, are we just duping ourselves that this is actually doable? And then they're time-based. So I bring this up because as you think about numbers, picture, stories, you want them to match SMART goals. And I actually think that's true both of in-house attorneys, and I think I challenge those of us that are private practitioners and in law firms to think about ourselves in this way as well. So I'm just going to show you a couple of numbers, picture, stories that have been shared with me. So we were working with a large energy company, and these are a few things that they're measuring. So this is not pretty. This is an Excel spreadsheet, but these are their goals. So part of their goals is, are we measuring our outside counsel? So looking at spend as a percentage of their revenue, right? Like, how big of a pie is legal? Number of external firms, are we trying to make that larger? Hint, hint, they're trying to make it smaller, right? Preferred panels. They want to understand, because it's part of their process, they want to better manage those outside counsel. So they have a discipline of conducting evaluations. So how many evaluations have we done of firms? And then I think someone on the panel mentioned that, right? Like, how much of those fees are actually done, or those matters are done as flat fees or alternative fees, looking for that certainty. So those are the metrics that they look at specifically for outside counsel effectiveness. They also look and take a pretty good look at their portfolio of litigation. This is obviously an Uber legal department, an Uber energy company. And so they're looking again, how do I demonstrate as a proxy of my effectiveness? Well, they're looking at matter counts. So it's how many matters were open? How many were closed? If we did close them, what were the settlements for those? How many do we have pending? And what do we have in reserves? So those are all things. Again, this may not be the right fit for your legal department, but it gives you an idea of numbers or pictures or stories that you might start to collect specifically. So in addition to looking at their portfolio, here's the other thing that they do. They do those surveys out, not just of their outside counsel, but to their business partners, right? So here we are thinking, oh, let's judge our law firms. Let's have our internal business clients evaluate us. And so they were doing things like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how responsive are we? On a scale of 1 to 5, are your business goals my business goals? Have I demonstrated that I understand those business goals? So there's all of these things that, that this particular department. And again, what you notice is there's time management, right, in there. There's metrics. They can actually see how they move the needle. And all of these goals, again, are tied to their yearly objectives. It might be something as beautiful as a pie chart. So again, for this particular legal department, they understand their legal spend by organizational unit. So it might be that if you look at this year over year, even looking at the size of the pie piece for a particular organizational unit might trigger a question, right? The right question. They look at their portfolio by matter type. No surprise for this particular company, litigation's their biggest piece of pie. And then not only are they looking at, they'll look at litigation matters by org unit. And again, the idea is not for it to be, the idea is for it to take a look at it so it triggers the right question. It might be that you're collecting data on your outside counsel. So we see a lot of legal departments actually start the data and collection process with regards to their legal spend. So what we do, and Serengeti has this embedded in their matters, the ACC actually use this for their evaluation process. You know, if you were to evaluate your outside counsel, what are both the quantitative and qualitative metrics you would want to capture? And so it's some things, it's easy as asking the question, did my outside counsel understand my goals? Did they demonstrate the relative expertise, or did I just pay for a first year to learn a particular piece of new legal knowledge? Were they efficient? Did they staff this right? You know, was it partners that were suddenly keeping work that should have been pushed down? Or was it, I was sharing with friends during the heyday down the valley, there were a lot of young associates doing really large deals, probably not very well supervised. Data about your staffing would have captured that. So this is actually a report that one of our customers shared with us. And again, they have a preferred panel. Many of you are either on those preferred panels or you're trying to create a preferred panel. And they know exactly of that panel, of the 15 firms, what type of work that firm does, how much of their pie, right, their outside counsel pie, goes to that firm. And then you also see this. They have an evaluation score. Because at the end of the year, they know that they're going to get that letter that we all get from our law firms. 365 days have passed. Our new rates will be X. And there's no problem receiving that. But what they do is they have reports, measurements, intake that they can use to have better conversations with their outside counsel. And that's how the data can help. You know, oftentimes, David, you were talking about, like, I need to solve business problems, right? Like, but how do I demonstrate that the problem that I've solved has actually been effective? And this was just a story that attorney had shared with me. And for a very long time, this company they saw that they had a creeping employment HR issue. It was actually, you know, behind the scenes, it was a particular person and a particular org unit that was the majority of that. But they saw that it was creeping up, and so what they did is they also knew that they could do much more on compliance. So there was more compliance work that came in, many more trainings, and that was a huge hit, right? That was one of their goals, increase trainings for the corporation. And they could actually show how that reduced liability, exposure, matters, and legal spend. Someone on the panel was mentioning this too, right? Oftentimes you think of data for litigators, right? It's because you could break out all the spend by phase of litigation. But what we do see are a lot of transactional attorneys also mining data about their own work, about the deals that they are doing. And so this is a story about a young associate who was like, I need to demonstrate my value, and I also need help in Q4. And I don't know if that means we need to second someone from a law firm, or whether it means that we need to bring in a part-time contractor during this time. But because of that, he was able to show exactly how much revenue and sales were at stake, what the business imperative was, and why in Q4 he needed help. So he used data and numbers and pictures to make that. And there's some other really interesting things that we see to transactional attorneys collecting number of requests, turnaround time. So those are all things that you might consider when you're thinking of KPIs. So I'll end on this. So I was having this conversation about KPIs with the general counsel here in New York of a, I won't mention. And she was very excited. She was like, you know what happens to me at the end of the year? I get the challenge. And I was like, what is the challenge? She says, well, we have to, each of the executives have 30 minutes and one slide to tell the story about their department, what that department did. And it's two things, right? It's to celebrate the good things that happened in that department. But more importantly, it's also to set the budget for the following year. And that there is the challenge. So on her one slide, these are some of the things she has included because they're meaningful to her, her board, her CFO, her CEO. So we were talking about proxy. So she's able to tell you exactly the number of open matters for her legal department and the number of countries that they're working in. She's also able to demonstrate and tell you the number of matters that are closed, right, as a proxy of efficiency. She knows with great detail the spend with her panel firms, global spend, US spend, and how much of that is on budget. This, if I don't trip over it, this is the thing that's most important, right? Because you never, right? We don't need to be math geniuses to know on a budget, you really don't want to be over 100%. But for this department, you also don't want to overmanage such that that number, like, terrific job, you've managed your budget down to 70%. Because you know what's going to happen next year? You only get 70% of that budget, and that's not great either. So she calls this right here the challenge. And then she's also able to demonstrate, for our litigation, this was the amount claimed against the company, and here's the good news. This is the amount that we paid. Bravo to our litigators. And the same way, we filed this number of complaints or this number of matters, and this was actually the amount recovered. So for her, this is the challenge, and this is the power of the story. She has to tell a story at the end of the year, and her story is limited to it's like a Darwin talk. It's 30 minutes and one slide. So I hope that, I know I went through this very fast, which is what Darwin talks are, but I hope that I've left you with an idea of some numbers, pictures, stories that you might want to be able to tell about your own practice, your own department. Maybe as you started to collect some data, it might spark some interesting conversations. It might be for your own professional development. It might be that you're a GC in training and this is the way you need to start thinking about some of the work that you're doing. But I hope that the numbers start working for you. And thanks for sharing, having me at Evolve. So.
Thank you, Evolve, and thank you. You all are great speakers.